All right, today we are reviewing F4 foils, specifically the Orca series. And right here I have the Orca 800. And this was the first foil that I ordered from F4. And since that time, I've also ordered the 685, which is just basically a smaller version of the 800. And I've had the opportunity to try the Manta. I'll talk about that a little bit, but mostly this review is going to be specifically on the Orca series. And when I first heard about F4, I really didn't know much about them. And the interesting thing to me was that there wasn't, you go on their website, they don't have any crazy, promotional marketing videos about the foils. There's no team rider that's saying, oh, these are the best foils ever, like we often see. Most of the hype that I encountered with these foils kind of came from other riders just telling me how good they were. So that was very interesting to me and kind of intriguing. But since that time, I've had the opportunity to ride specifically this 800, and I've ridden the 685 a few times, but I've ridden this 800 a lot over the past month or so, and I really got to see how amazing it is. And I want to talk about some things that make the Orca series so good for someone that really likes to downwind, whether it be parawing, sup downwind, prone shore runners, whatever. Just want to talk about a few things that really make this foil great and why you should try it out. The first thing, I think the aspect ratio on these foils, I believe it's like 12, maybe 12 and some change. If you go on their website, it'll tell you. But it would be considered a pretty high aspect foil. But one of the first things I noticed about it was that for a foil that's as high aspect as it is, and that has such a wide wingspan, it turns a lot better than some other high aspect wings that I've ridden, with similar AR, aspect ratios. So to me, the cool thing about these foils is you can kind of have your cake and eat it too. If you want a foil that's really great for downwinding, that you don't have to sacrifice glide, that you can do long downwinders on, this is a great. But a foil that you can still turn really well, which I think is the problem. A lot of those really high aspect foils, that's what they kind of miss out on, is the ability to carve and turn. This foil kind of does that. I mean, like I said, you have the ability to just glide effortlessly, but then you can still turn them a lot better than other foils with similar aspect ratios. So to me, that was the first thing that I noticed about it, was like, wow, this is a great, obviously it's got great glide, it's a high aspect foil, but at the same time, I can still turn it. And I think, definitely turn better than some other foils with similar aspect ratios. So that was the first thing. The second thing that I noticed about it was just the range is so good on it. I mean, I've done runs, I did specifically, I can remember one run I've done on it where we have like a run here where it starts kind of where the ocean meets the bay, or the bay meets the ocean, and then it finishes all the way at the end of or further up into the bay. And so because of that, a lot of times you'll have really big bumps in the beginning, or a lot of energy in the beginning of the run, but by the time you get to the end of the run, the bumps or whatever, the swells are much smaller, more compact, and there's much less energy. So in doing a run like that, it's always kind of like, okay, well, what foil do I ride? Do I want to be, adequately foiled at the top, but then I'm underfoiled at the bottom, or I could be overfoiled at the top, but then be perfect at the bottom. But the cool thing about this foil is just that the range is so good. On the run that I can really remember on it, like I said, the run started out with these huge kind of open ocean bumps coming into the bay, where I was, plenty foiled, but not overfoiled. And then at the end, the run ended in tiny little gutless wind bumps. And this foil, or this 800, handled all those conditions, perfectly. So to me, that is a huge thing. I think that I'd like to see more brands start doing, is just making foils with a greater range, because while it's nice to purchase every single foil in a foils range, It's nice to also just have one or two foils that you can use in any conditions. And so for me, the 800 has been something that I can use, in pretty light breeze, not like no breeze, but obviously pretty light breeze. But then I can also still use it on downwinders, where it's pretty windy, the bumps are pretty big. And then of course, if it gets really windy, I'm busting out the 685. I haven't really found the top end of this yet, but I definitely, figured out what the low end is. But I think that's just kind of the Orca all around is that it has this, people keep talking about it has this amazing range. When you compare it to other foils, you can buy one of these Orcas and, replace two other foils of a different brand. So to me, that is like a really awesome attribute, especially when you're spending, a lot of money. If a front wing is $1,000, it's nice to know that you have a foil that's covering the range adequately. So that's really awesome. The other thing about them, the Orca, that's really great is the amount of stability these wings have. They're just crazy stable. And one of the cool things that I think that because they're crazy stable, you can ride a shorter and kind of F4, just to comment on the setup, it's kind of similar to like Lift or I guess F1, where there's no actual fuse. It's just the front wing and the tail wing. But I've noticed that because they're so stable, you can ride a shorter fuse or a shorter tail wing and not really sacrifice stability. So that is another amazing attribute. The other amazing thing is just how light they are. I feel like for someone that's like a lighter rider, I don't know, I kind of fall in between lighter, 160 pounds, whether I don't know whether I'd be considered a lighter rider or a heavier rider. But I certainly don't have, I have little string bean legs, so I'm not, manhandling when I'm pumping by any means. So the one nice thing about these foils is that they're so light that they just feel so nimble under your feet. I just feel like anytime you can ride something that's lighter, to me that's just, amazing, because I don't want to be carrying around a heavy foil, and I just like that feeling of lighter foils and having more performance, which definitely these foils provide. The other cool thing that I noticed in riding them, and I think I've heard some other people talking about them, that I haven't really experienced from some other foils, is the ability to accelerate on these foils. I feel like you can be on foil going downwind, you feel like you're kind of running out of steam, and you do a couple good pumps, and then all of a sudden you're back up to speed. That's something that I've experienced on these foils that I haven't really experienced on too many other foils. So to me, that was pretty amazing. Talk about the Manta a little bit. I've ridden this. This is a friend's 750. I have not ridden this, but I did ride the 800. And the crazy thing about these foils is just the amount of dihedral. I mean, it's crazy how much dihedral is in these foils. But in any event, they also seem like they're a little bit heavier than the Orca, which is interesting. I don't think I really noticed that until right now. But the Manta, I don't know what the aspect ratio is. I think it's around 9. But I rode the 850 Manta on like a pretty good, windy, it was like 25 knots bay run. And the first thing I was thinking was, okay, well, if I hop on this foil that's like around 9 aspect ratio, I'm gonna lose all the glide, right? Yeah, of course I'll get the turning, but I'm gonna lose all the glide. And once again, I was really surprised because the amount of glide that these Mantas have is crazy. You would not think that a 9 or less than 9 aspect ratio would have as much glide as they do. And of course, they turn on a dime, and they're very high performance oriented as well. So that was all the great things about F4 foils that I've noticed so far. Are there any negatives? Because we don't always want to focus on the positives. We want to talk about, be real, and talk about whether there's any negatives to the foils as well. And to be honest with you, I haven't found too many negatives really, or if any at all. But the one big one that I would say is that I've just noticed these foils are a little bit more fragile. And specifically, you know, in the masts, if you get the skinny mast, you know, it's obviously extremely thin on this side that, you know, you got to really take careful. I have another mast, I'm not going to show it right now, but I have a couple dings that I've already gotten in it. And I've just noticed that the gear is fragile. So, you know, you need to really make sure you put all your covers. I'm kind of the type of person, I'll just throw my stuff in my truck, and I don't always take as good of care of it as I should. But with these foils, you really need to keep your covers on the mast, especially since the masts are so expensive. And keep your covers on your foils, and just, you know, because, like I said, I think because they are so high performance, they are a little bit more fragile, and you just got to keep that in mind. But that's, like I said, performance. I'm willing to pay that price. I'm willing to have something that's more performance oriented for slightly more fragile. So that's what I would say as far as the negatives. That's really the only negative I have seen in any of these foils. Like I said, they're amazing. They're lightweight. They work great. The range is great. They're stable. The glide is insane. So if you haven't tried F4, give them a go, because these foils are really great, and they make downwinding so much better. Cheers.